This is Jared with metalspeak.com here today with a review of a Frail Becoming, the latest release from Daylight Dies, a US doom metal group. Album's release date is October 9th, 2012 through Candlelight Records. For Brutality, I gave this album an 8 out of 10. Daylight Dies are a doom metal band, as I mentioned before, so it's not going to be the fastest, most face-pummeling music you'll hear this year, but it is really, really heavy. The songs aren't as murky and oppressive as one might typically expect on a doom metal album, but they still carry a very mournful, emotional weight, even on even on some of the more up-tempo songs, even if they're only slightly up-tempo by comparison to some of the other tracks on the album. Aren't a lot of head-banging moments on this one, but there are a lot of times where you're going to find yourself nodding in agreement to the beat nonetheless. So very, very heavy album. For songwriting, I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10. Daylight Dies have always been amazing songwriters, and they still are. One thing I've always appreciated about this band is their ability to tastefully intermingle the clean vocals and the deathly growls with the galloping rhythms and mournful dirges. Frail Becoming is really a masterstroke in this regard. It's well anchored in the doom genre, but provides enough variety and deviation from the Florida to keep the listener's attention. The album's opening track, Infidel, is probably a little more up-tempo gallop a la 1 Second Era Paradise Lost, and is followed by a Pale Approach, which starts off at about the same pace but then segues into this gorgeous soaring lull before coming back to crush you one last time. Then there's Sunset, which has to have one of the sickest guitar solos I've ever heard in this genre. Other standout tracks in the album are Final Vestige and Ghosting, both of which feature two of the more memorable lead riffs in recent memory. Uh, Not just in the doom genre, but overall, they really stick to the ribs on the leads there. But really, the album's crown jewel, in my opinion, is Hold On to Nothing, which is the seventh track on the album. The opening melody on this album is a deceptively simple progression that just builds and builds in intensity to about the 4-minute mark, at which point it transitions into what is quite possibly the best guitar solo I've ever heard from a doom metal band. This song literally gives me goosebumps every time I listen to it, especially at the 5:30 mark on through the end. I know the word epic gets thrown around a lot, but I'm really hard pressed to think of a word that better describes what's happening with this song. It's just anybody that knows me knows that I'm obsessed with Oscillator by the Contortionist, and I've often talked about how I get goosebumps when I listen to that. This one is a close second to that song in my personal opinion. As far as the goosebump factor, it's such an awesome song. The album's closer, In Air to Emptiness, is probably about as funeral doom as the album gets, but has some unique mood shifts, and some of the guitar leads even sound hopeful at times before, again, kind of going back into the more crushing, darker stuff. Overall, it really isn't a bad song on the album, so very, very well written, very well arranged. On production, I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10. The album sounds absolutely pristine. The guitar tone is on point, the low end is thick without fuzzing things out too much, and the drums are very well placed in the mix. As far as repeat listenability goes, I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10. I am absolutely in love with this album. It's well written, it has a lot of songwriting variety, and it keeps my interest front to back. Even at times when I'm not able to bite off the entire album in one chunk, it has enough great go-to tracks that keep me going back to it again and again. As far as the artwork and layout goes, giving this one a 7 out of 10. Again, because we only got the digital promo on this one, so it's kind of hard to judge what the entire package looks like. Cover image kind of looks like a snake that's kind of stretched and distorted, kind of aimlessly meandering in the dark. Kind of a cool graphic, but not really mind-blowing. But then it's not really typical of bands in the genre to go overboard in the packaging. So all things considered, it's still pretty cool to look at. Overall, I'm going to give this album a 9 out of 10. With a Frail Becoming, Daylight Dies have once again shown why they've earned a place in the upper echelon of not only my Doom collection, but my music collection overall. Back in 2008, I thought Lost to the Living was one of the best releases of that year, so it was a little frustrating to have to wait 4 years for another offering from them. But I have to say this album was well worth the wait. It's crushing and beautiful in equal measure. It progresses at a tasteful pace without losing its identity as a doom metal album. And definitely wouldn't surprise me if this ended up in my top 10 for 2012, if not my top 5. So thanks for listening. Check out the album. You won't regret it. Thanks.